I'd like to go ahead and introduce my next guest. Cenk Uygur is host of the Young Turks on Current TV, as well as the host and co-founder of the Young Turks Online, which is the largest news show on the internet. TYT on Current TV features Uygur and a group of progressive, outspoken journalists and commentators discussing politics and pop culture in an unscripted, no-holds-barred atmosphere that breaks the mold of traditional cable news programming. Uygur is the former host of MSNBC Live and has appeared numerous times on CNN, CNN News, E! Entertainment Channel, Al Jazeera, ABC News, Voice of America, NPR, and even Fox News Channel. He is one of the most popular bloggers on the Huffington Post and is also a contributor to Daily Kos and Political. Uygur is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business and Columbia University Law School. And I just want to say that, one of the things that we had noticed last year, many people realized when we went through the, let's say, the challenging times that we had last summer, as we were going into the debt ceiling vote, and the fact that this caucus decided to make a challenge. We went through a very trying time. Everyone knows this. And we came into the November keyboard meeting. We came back together, we healed for that moment, and we are working together to try to make sure that we defeat the Republicans in this upcoming election. Now, it wasn't easy while it went down, but we also noticed a person that was going along a similar parallel timeline as he was going from MSNBC to Current TV for kind of the same reasons. And because of that, we saw him essentially as kind of like a kind of a comrade as far as the whole fight. We were having the same difficulties and we understood it. And we thought to ourselves, we'd like to be able to share the views on this going forward. And we'd like to be able to hear his story. So please welcome Cenk Uygur.
Tonight I'm going to speak about how progressives can reclaim the Democratic Party, but first I understand that people were concerned about an issue that was discussed here earlier, and I just want to make a really quick statement on that. Look, I understand completely the tremendous pain that the Armenian community feels about the historical situation that happened in that era, and I understand the concern about the name of the show, and I want to reassure everyone that it has no historical reference whatsoever. And the dictionary definition we looked up literally said, young progressives looking to overthrow an established system. And that is exactly what we wanted to do and who we were at the time. I'm no longer that young, so time has passed. And I want to work with the Armenian community further at a different time to resolve this issue as best as we can. I work with Armenians every single day because my co-host is Armenian. And we've done the show together for 5 years now, and we're trying to reach understanding for all of us going forward together in America, where we all work together for a better future. So now let's go on to what we all came here for. I want to start by saying that, I often hear, whether it was callers on the radio show or I hear from bloggers, commenters, etc., liberals are weak. That's why we can't win. I hear that liberals cannot work together and that we're not an organized party. I hear a lot of things about what liberals can't do. And I'm here to tell you that is totally wrong. I remember a time when when liberals were lions in this country. If you remember FDR, and when the banks and the rich came for him, he said, I welcome their hatred. He took them on and he beat them. And he did it with the backing of the American people. I was just at the LBJ library, and I don't believe anybody would call Lyndon Baines Johnson weak. And, you know, I remember a story where they were having, of course, enormous trouble getting enough votes for the Civil Rights Act. And a lot of the Democratic Southern senators did not want to vote that way because they thought it would be the end of their career. And Lyndon stood them down and said, you are going to vote this way, come hell or high water. And to some of them he said, I know it's going to cost you your job, but we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And he won. And he won over and over and over again. And then, anybody remember the Nader Raiders? And they ran roughshod through the country. Seatbelts, OSHA, EPA, all those terrific accomplishments in the 1970s. Who called them weak then? Nobody called them weak then. They were Nader Raiders, okay? They got Richard Nixon to pass the EPA. Tell me again, though, we're weak. Hell no. That is not what's wrong with the Democratic Party. That is not what's wrong with liberals or progressives in this country. In the right atmosphere, with the right system, with a democracy that's functioning well, we can take on any project, any issue, and we can win over and over again. And let me tell you another fact here and dispel myths. This country is fundamentally progressive.
Yes.
They have one nonsense poll that everybody in the mainstream media quotes because apparently they don't have a full grasp of the issues, which makes me wonder how they got their job. Maybe that is why they got their job. And it says, you know, are you a conservative, are you a liberal, are you independent? Now, in that formulation, liberal does not come out on top. Why? Because for 30, 40 years now, they have poisoned the well, and they have spoken ill of liberals, and no one fought back. And so now when you ask the average guy, he says, oh no, I'm not a liberal. He might even say he's a conservative. But when you look issue by issue in nearly every single poll in the country is liberal, it is progressive, it is way center-left. That's not a matter of debate, that's not a matter of opinion, that's a fact. I can show you every poll. They ask, are you willing to take reductions in Social Security if it means we balance the budget and we help to get rid of the debt? 84% say no. No, under no circumstances am I willing to take a cut in Social Security. You know, the Republicans call it entitlements. You know why it was originally called an entitlement?
We're entitled to it.
Exactly. We paid into it our whole lives. We are entitled to that money because it's our money. You go down the list: Medicare, progressive; education, progressive; cut defense, progressive. Over 60% of the country says, for the love of God, cut defense already. Department of Defense anymore. It's the Department of Offense. And Americans get it. They don't want to go and invade countries for no reason, like Iraq, because somebody wants to make money for whatever reason. It might be the oil, it might be the defense contractors, but did it help any of us? Did the Iraq invasions help a single American?
No!
And you think the American people don't know that? Of course they know that. So a dozen other issues where progressives win. Almost every single one, if you ask a specific poll, we win. So how did we get here that we have wall-to-wall political losses? Whether it's Republicans beating Democrats, or whether it's Democrats beating each other. Well, I'm going to tell you exactly how we got here. And I'll tell you, it actually came from a conversation I had with Ralph Nader. Because I said to him, you know, you're winning everything. You're running the board in the 1970s. Nixon is scared to death of you. What happened? Why did it turn around? And he said, I have one name for you. Tony Coelho. And I thought that was really interesting. And I have to confess that at the time that I had that conversation, I didn't know who Tony Coelho was. So I went and looked it up. And Tony Coelho is the guy who came to the Democratic Party and said, let's get the corporate money. Okay? He said, don't worry, it won't corrupt us. Don't worry, we'll be able to compete with the Republicans and get progressive things through. Now, but before you get to the story of Tony Coelho, you have to go back actually a couple more years. So in 1971, a guy wrote a memo that turned out to be absolutely critical. His name was Lewis Powell. He was a corporate lawyer, and his whole life he had worked for corporations and made a healthy living doing so. And he wrote a memo to a friend at the Chamber of Commerce. And he said, you know, first of all, we got to fight back against the liberals in everything. Whether it's the media, whether it's Congress, etc. But the one thing we really haven't tackled enough yet is the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court keeps siding with the American people. We can't have it. Now, he didn't write that part of the memo, right? But that was implicit. They won't let us get our way. They won't let us pollute. They won't let us kill people if we don't have seatbelts in our cars. Damn it, we don't want to put seatbelts in the cars. And if people fly out the window, who cares? I'm going to make an extra buck. And the damn Supreme Court is in our way. He writes the memo, it goes all the way up to Richard Nixon, and then Richard Nixon says, hey, you know what? How would you like to be on the Supreme Court? And he put Powell on the Supreme Court. Now, what is the consequence of that? 5 years later, 1976, Buckley v. Vallejo. The Supreme Court decides, hey, will you look at that? Money equals speech. So if you've got a ton of money, that's okay, it's a First Amendment right, you're allowed to speak, okay? Who is on the side of the majority there? Lewis Powell. And then, the critical decision that almost no one talks about. It's not Citizens United, it's not Buckley v. Vallejo. It's First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti in 1978. That is where Lewis Powell writes that corporations have constitutional rights. They're not just people, but they have a right to speech. And by the way, speech equals money. So, at that point, the die is cast. Because from then on, corporations can spend unlimited money buying our politicians. Now, Citizens United, many, many years later, put that on steroids and said, you know, just have at it. Okay, do your super PACs, do your independent expenditures, absolutely positively unlimited. But you got a sense that things were wrong before Citizens United, right?
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, I can show you now, we often show it on the show. Any graph, you see right around the end of the 1970s, beginning of 1980, median wages start to drop. The top 1% starts to rise. Between 1979 and today, the top 1% have increased their income by over 280%, while the rest of us have had our median wages fall. And the only reason we're hanging on by a thread, by the way, is because of women. Because if women did not go join the workforce, and if they had not gotten a little bit more equality, we'd be getting crushed right now. The median wages of men, compared to what they were in 1978, are horrible. The minimum wage is lower than it's ever been in that regard. If the minimum wage had just kept up with inflation, right now it would be $10. But it isn't. It's it's $7.25, I think. And they say it's too high. The Republicans want to take that away. And they want to do child labor laws. And they want to bring back all the horrible things we went through and fought through, etc. So, after the Bellani decision, it's 1978. We come back to Tony Coy. And Tony Coy comes in and says, hey guys, the Supreme Court's going to let us take corporate money. Let's do it. Let's jump in it. Let's start taking that corporate money. And what does that lead to? That leads to a long line of corporate Democrats who honestly couldn't give a damn about us. The Joe Liebermans. And I remember in 06, we're doing the show in 2006, and I'm saying, under no circumstances should any right-thinking Democrat support Joe Lieberman. The guy is not, well, you know, I used to say back then he's not a Democrat. Unfortunately, he is, or was. He's not a progressive by any shape of the imagination. And I remember at the time, a lot of good, well-meaning people say, well, you know, he votes with us most of the time and his heart's in the right place and we have to support Democrats no matter what. That's what they said. And they were wrong. What was the first thing Joe Lieberman did when he got back in the Senate?
Change.
Do you know? The very first action he took, when they gave him a committee position, chairman of a committee, he stopped an investigation into Hurricane Katrina. Because he's not on our side. If you think our side is Democrats, the official party that has now become addicted to corporate money as the Republicans are, then yes, he's on your side. But if you think our side are progressives who want to actually move this country forward, then Joe Lieberman is nowhere near our side. And all I ever hear on television about Evan Bayh is that what a wonderful bipartisan guy he is. Evan Bayh is a corporate robot through and through. Every inch of Evan Bayh is a corporate robot. When I see him on Morning Joe and they're all smiling, so-called conservatives and so-called liberals, and they pretend that there are liberals on that show. And they all sit there and say, oh, Evan Bayh, thank you so much for your service. We just wish every other senator was like you. They do. The mainstream media does wish that. Because it is bipartisan conclusion that they should rob us blind. That they should take our Social Security, they should take our Medicare, that we paid into our whole lives for a grand bargain. A grand bargain where you know what would happen? The rich would get another tax cut. By the way, if you hear Democrats talking about, oh, grand bargain, but the Tea Party stopped it, golly gee, I wish they wouldn't have. That is a very rare situation where you should thank the Tea Party. Now, I know why they did it, because they're greedy. They want even more, right? They think, you know what, these guys are pushovers. We get everything we want. Some of them want taxes to be 0%. Newt Gingrich, leading the race for a while. Might come back still. Capital gains rate, he wants to be 0%. You know how you get the capital gains rate? You know, some of you might have money in the stock market. I have a little bit of money in the stock market. Here's how you get it. You press a button. You don't go to work. You don't put on a hard hat and you press a button. And if you're lucky and you make money, you got capital gains in the stock market. And for that, you should pay less than a guy who makes a little over $35,000. Do you know that if you make over $35,350 and you're an individual, you pay 25% on every dollar going forward. You pay 10%, 12% more than Mitt Romney, who has $250 million. How did we get there? It's because they bought our government. Because the rich, the corporations, including the politicians, Republicans and Democrats, and they wholesale bought our government. Now what? Do you think that they do that for their health because of ideological reasons? You remember the Keating scandal? When they asked Keating, hey, why'd you do it? Why'd you give all this money to John McCain and the rest of them? He said, I wanted a return on investment. He said, I'm not giving it for my health. I give them money, they give me a lot back, a lot more back. Whether it's tax cuts, it's corporate cronyism, the amount of money that flows out to those defense contractors is grotesque. And it's, sometimes I get into debates with conservatives and they say government is too big and all you liberals want to do is make it bigger. It isn't about the size of government. It isn't that I want a gigantic government. It's that I want a government that actually serves us. So if it's a government that is gigantic and takes all my tax dollars and funnels them to defense contractors like Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, etc., by starting senseless wars where thousands of our kids died and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi citizens died, well then I don't want a big government. The question is, what kind of government are you getting? Are you getting representatives that represent you? And unfortunately, we don't have that now. And unfortunately, a big chunk of the establishment media loves it because they get paid by the same guys. So, who do you work for? You work for the guy who signs your checks, right? Now, who signs the checks of our politicians? The lobbyists. Do you know that for people running in Congress, 93% of the candidates that had more money won their elections? In the Senate, it was 94%. So your position on Iraq did not matter very much. Your position on healthcare did not matter very much. Your position on taxes did not matter. The only thing that seemed to be an indicator of whether you were going to win or you were going to lose that seat was whether you had more money than the other candidate. In a system where we have 94% of the elections being decided by who has more money, of course you're not going to have a representative democracy. So if you're a rational politician and you don't care about principles or ideology, which, by the way, I hate to say it, is a lot of politicians, and these days on the national level, almost all of them. What is the rational response to, if I have more money, I will win? The rational response is, I got to raise more money. Where do I raise unlimited money? Corporations, right? And the Supreme Court allows it, Congress allows it. So what do? They don't represent you anymore. And I'm going to make that statement. And it seems maybe bold. It seems, I know outside of this room, people would react like, oh, come on, you liberals, you radicals. But we have lost our representative democracy. So do I want a big government where the politicians don't represent me? I don't. You know what that is? That's taxation without representation.
That's right.
And so, I cover this every single day and on every single issue. Public option. Polls, 60%, some in the 70s, some in the high 50s. The country wants it. Polls showing that at points a majority of Republicans wanted the public option in healthcare. That's the voters. The politicians, none of them want it, right? None of them. The Republicans didn't want it, and I got news for you. The Democrats didn't want it. Okay? They sold it out so quick, it'll make your head spin. Okay? Now, wait a minute. I thought we were in a democracy. Why is an issue that is getting 70% approval? If we lived in a democracy, wouldn't politicians be all tripping over themselves to say, I'm on that side, I'm on that side? How come nearly every politician in the country was on the opposite side? Because we don't have a representative democracy. We have people who get their checks from lobbyists. And they represent those lobbyists. They represent those corporate interests. They don't represent us. And we have got to change it. Now, unfortunately, I voted for a guy who promised that he was going to change the way Washington worked. And I didn't just vote for him. I did a show every single day supporting him over other candidates, over other Democratic candidates, over Republican candidates. because I was absolutely convinced he was a great guy and he was, you know, and that he was going to do everything right. And I'm very realistic and pragmatic about politics. I know even if we had a system that functioned effectively, no politician is going to agree with you 100%. This is not how it works. That music sent by IBM.
Or FBI.
All right. By the way, IBM is a brand corporation. Okay, so I'll continue. And I voted for him, and I thought, look, I don't need him to topple mountains. I need him to try, right? And by trying, I didn't mean, hey, you know what, you got to do everything, or 80% or 60% or 40% of what I want in healthcare or financial reform, etc. His principal promise was change the way Washington works, right? And a number of bills proposed by President Obama and his allies in Congress to change the way Washington works, funded by lobbyists, funded by corporations. Everybody knows them, right? Zero. Not on the agenda. Taking it on how Washington works, not on the agenda, even though that was the central focus of his campaign. Now, I don't say that to bash President Obama, and I agree with some of his actions, and I disagree with others. I say it because it's partly what's led me here. If you have a hope that national Democratic leaders are going to rescue you, that is the most misplaced hope you could possibly have. It is not going to happen. They are not coming to the rescue, and unfortunately, a lot of them are not even on your side. They're never going to change the way Washington works. They're not even trying. Now, several of them are good, earnest people, no question about it. Bernie Sanders is a great guy. By the way, if you notice, Bernie's an independent. Look, there are a lot of senators that are good on many, many issues, Sheldon Whitehouse, Merkley, Ron Wyden, and then they're maddening on other issues, etc., right? We don't want 100% agree, that's not what we're going here for, okay? But if you're waiting for a majority of the Democrats nationally to go, oh, right, the representative democracy, right, lobbyists have bought all this. Sorry about that. We're going to lead the fight to change that. Not going to happen. Some have introduced amendments, some are great. Some have introduced amendments, to be honest, constitutional amendments on this issue, to raise money. And this is unfortunately what happens when you follow politics too closely. You get angrier and angrier. Because you think like, oh, look at that! Senator Schumer was part of a group proposing an amendment for, you know, to say that corporations shouldn't be able to buy politicians. And you look a little deeper, it turns out he's sending that around to liberal email lists so he can raise money off. It's so callous. It's disturbing. So what do we do? What do we do? We're stuck, right? I mean, if the Democrats aren't coming to the rescue, God knows the Republicans are. The Republicans are a wholly owned subsidiary of multinational corporations, okay? And not partly owned. And I don't play the establishment media games about, oh, let's be neutral. Let's be neutral. Democrats are this, and the Republicans are that, and the Republicans said this, Democrats said that. Nonsense. The Republicans, they're not a little bad. They're almost entirely bad.
Yep. Right.
They're not representing us. They don't give a care. Look at all the things that they claim to care about. They claim to care about balancing budgets. You want to know the last Republican president that balanced the budget? Dwight Eisenhower. Okay? You know why? Because Republicans don't balance budgets. That's not what they do. They don't give a damn about it. That's not their job. Their job is to cut taxes. Well, all right, great. So you're going to cut the payroll tax, right? That goes to average Americans. Oh, no, we didn't mean middle-class Americans. We meant our whole job is to cut taxes for the top 1%. That is at least 99% of the Republican Party. It's not 55%, it's not 15%. They are 99% sellouts. And they're not sellouts just to us, they're not sellouts to the American people, they are sellouts to their own constituents. They told the Tea Party, oh, we're mad about the bailout. under any circumstances, to actually protest the bailout. How many Tea Party protests have been done at Wall Street? 0. How many have been done at the Treasury Department? Now, if you're a real Republican and you really think that we're going on the wrong path ideologically, and who screwed up our economy? You would think the Treasury Secretary, the guy most responsible in the Obama administration. Their #1 issue they ran in 2010 was jobs in the economy. How many protests in front of the Treasury Department?
None.
Actually, 1, because I did. And our fans and others showed up. Dylan Radigan, God bless his heart, on MSNBC, Russia Today, etc. The rest of the establishment media was not there. We did a protest because I know Goldman Sachs took $13 million straight out of our pockets through the backdoor bailout of AIG. Goldman Sachs executives had told AIG, all right, you know what? In order to get any kind of money here, we think we lost the whole thing, we'll take 60 cents on the dollar, okay? Hank Paulson, Tim Geithner came in and said, no, we're going to give you 100 cents on the dollar. Now, one of the reasons that Hank Paulson did that is because he works at Goldman Sachs. He didn't just work at Goldman Sachs. All of his friends there, he made over $500 million at Goldman Sachs doing these kind of deals, screwing us over. So, the Republicans don't even represent their own voters, right? So, now that I've told you all the things that are hopeless, let's talk about hope.
Yes, please.
Okay. I got so tired of all this, I started a super PAC myself. And I said, let's fight fire with fire. Okay? Let's collect money and spend it on one thing and one thing only. And that is to make sure that no one else can ever buy our politicians again. Okay? To make sure that our politicians represent us. Now, how do I think we're going to do that? I think we absolutely need a constitutional amendment. Okay? Because these guys in Congress are never going to pass. And Lewis Powell, when he wrote that memo saying we should go basically by the Supreme Court, was unfortunately brilliant. It is corrupted, and if you know, even there have been good progressives on the court, but even Obama and Clinton brag as they put on Supreme Court justices. Don't worry, they're pro-business, right? We can win in the short run. Who knows? Maybe we even get 5-4 Supreme Court one day that are progressives and that overturn Citizens United, but they won't overturn Buckley v. Vallejo. They won't overturn Bellotti, and then so the cancer and the virus will live. And in the long run, they'll get more justices because they buy more politicians, and we'll lose that battle. So amendment is the only way to go. If anybody tells you otherwise, they're selling you false hope. Okay? In my opinion, the amendment needs to do 2 things. Corporations are not people. Constitutional rights.
Right.
They don't have a First Amendment right, Fourth Amendment right. They don't even have a Third Amendment right. Anybody even know what the Third Amendment is? Quartering soldiers. Quartering soldiers, exactly. If we want, they'll quarter goddamn soldiers. They don't have any rights. They're not human beings. And I want to ask you all to talk to your religious friends, okay? Whether they're conservatives, liberals, whatever it might be. Because Declaration of Independence says that we are endowed by our Creator, from our Creator, with inalienable rights. Inalienable rights. So wait a minute, we're the creators of corporations. They're a legal fiction. Did we endow them with inalienable rights? No. Isn't that sacrilegious? Does that make us God? Does that make corporations with moral rights endowed by God? I hope to God no religious person thinks that. So, corporations are not people. Number 2, we must publicly finance all elections. My amendment is broad because I don't want to leave that virus anywhere in the system. So it's not federal elections, it's federal, state, local elections. I don't want corporations buying any of our politicians.
That's right.
We work for the people who sign your checks. If we sign their checks, they work for us. All right, now the last part of this is, look, you know, this is a little controversial because people disagree and they think that we still can get 2/3 of Congress to vote for this amendment. I hope to God they're right and I'm wrong. But I don't see that happening. I think the virus has taken over the whole system. We'd be lucky to get 1/3 of politicians on our side. So my proposal is to get around Washington. If you read the Constitution, we don't need Washington at all. A constitutional convention can be called by 2/3 of the states. So we take it to the states, we fight state by state. Did you see the fight they had in them in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Do you have that same fight in you here in California? I believe we all have that fight in us. I believe we can do it state by state. I believe we can get 2/3, go to a convention, and then come back and get 3/4. Because, by the way, this is not a liberal issue. If you ask conservatives, this is the one thing we have total agreement on. They hate their politicians too. They think they're bought. They don't trust them. Why do you think Congress is at a 10% approval rating? We did research on our show. The only thing that has ever polled worse in the history of the U.S., Fidel Castro, Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, and Detective Mark Ferber. And then the U.S. Congress. Okay? By the way, when we did the revolution, our founding fathers did, James Madison said 1/3 agreed with the revolution, 1/3 were ambivalent, and 1/3 were with the royalty. They had a 33% approval rating for the monarchy. We have a 10% approval rating for our Congress. But we don't need that. We can do this. The only way you get 3/4 of the states to agree to an amendment is if we are all on board. And I can guarantee you, if we take it to the people, whether they're conservatives, independents, moderates, or liberals, they agree. It's time to stop having our politicians be bought by corporate money. I want to thank, of course, the Progressive Caucus that invited us here, and I want to thank all of you guys for coming out. And I want to say, and I believe we have Wolfpack leaflets over there that you can pick up. Wolf-pack.com is our website. More important than money, although of course we'll take that, is volunteers. Because we got to do this state by state. We need California badly, okay? And we need to have people join the fight. So if you can pick up some leaflets and see how you can help, that would be great. And my final words to you is what I started with. You know, they say the liberals are weak. Let's show them how strong we can be.
Yes.
Thank you.